Hello everybody. How you doing? I hope you're going well wherever it is that you are, that the weather isn't too extreme, that there isn't too much strife around you, and that you're in reasonably good health. And if those things are not happening for you, I do hope that you have some improvement sometime soon. And in the meantime, maybe we can distract you a little from the uncomfortable, unpleasant things that are going on around you with a little bit more from William again, that rascally young lad from early 20th century rural England, English village, which is what we're reading at the moment. What's going on here? I successfully ordered groceries, which will be arriving tomorrow. Yay, I don't have to go into the supermarket, which is always a win, not having to go to the supermarket. It's one of those things that I do it because it needs to be done, but it's not my favourite thing to do. I don't like having lots and lots of people around me all the time and too much noise and things like that. Sometimes I wear sunglasses for the bright lights, and sometimes I wear headphones to block out all the extra sound, usually one or the other. Anyway, so what else? Just normal life stuff going on here. Tried out using my mobile phone to do a test stream. It's meant to provide, the program that I'm using is meant to provide an overlay for it, which doesn't look like it has at all, which is disappointing. I mean, it won't be a fancy one or anything like that, but just some sort of overlay. So I'm going to be seeing if I can get that one sorted out, just so that when we do our next family trip somewhere and I'm away from my computer, away from my desk, I'll be able to still read for you and use my mobile phone, which I have tried to do before. It hasn't always been that successful, but whatever. Yeah, that sort of stuff. Lots of technical things going on. Me taking photographs of products for our home products that we make, my husband makes, and I put them on our website. He's now writing descriptions for them so we can put them on the website to be sold. Yeah, and I'm happy with the way the lighting is working for that. That's another thing that I've been gradually improving, and a lot of the things I've learnt to do with that are because of me streaming. I have come to understand some aspects of using lighting in better ways. You may have noticed that today I don't have this light on this side because I have a slight headache from the pressure change in our weather at the moment, and having two bright lights is just a little bit much for my head at the moment. I also like the fact that it gives you a different feel to what things look like, not so flat and bland. Anyway, it does show off the wrinkles nicely. If you got them, be proud of them. Go on, you've earned them. If you're new here, hi, I'm Jev, and I just randomly natter away about all sorts of things before I read a book to you and get lost partway through the page and then get back on track again, and I chat in the chapter breaks and at the beginning and the end. So if you're here live listening to me on Twitch, you're most welcome to join in the chat here. It is family friendly, the stream that we have here. I read old books. They are ones which are in public domain, and I read children's old books just because there are people around who read adults' books, and wonderful, go and listen to them if that's the sort of thing you want. But if you want something that's a little bit more lightweight than a lot of the adults' books that are available on public domain, if you want something that you can listen to with your children or your grandchildren, keeping in mind that I've got an itchy ankle. Keeping in mind that the public sensibilities were a little bit different around the turn of the century, the 19th to the 20th century. So some of the books have attitudes that are a little bit different to ours these days. Not that we espouse them in any way whatsoever, but we don't whitewash them, we don't blank them out of the way that life was understood to function once upon a time, because we can learn from them. So that's why I will willingly read about things that may have characters in with attitudes that we don't agree with these days. It's a great way to expand our understanding of the world that has been as well as the way it is now, and also people from other places and other cultures, not just our own generation and time period, but also from other time periods as well. It's a great way to actually understand the world that we live in a lot better. Lots of fun. A different way of seeing the world. A bit of escapism. Yep, some of the books are definitely in the category of escapism. There's a little bit of magic in some of them. There's just pure mischief and normal boyhood misbehaviours in other ones. There are things like the current book that we're reading now, William Again by Richmal Crompton, is full of situations where young William, who is about 11 years old, gets in trouble for, most of the time it's unintentional, because adults have said something and he has taken them literally at their word, and then he's got in trouble with it, with having done so. And back in the day, adults didn't admit that they had put something in a way that wasn't necessarily the most logical or helpful or correct even. A lot of them have been learning that through the activities of William. It's just one of those things. The background behind me at the moment is basically just a village street in rural England around the time period of when the Williams books were originally written, when they are set. Some of our books previously have been set in London around the same time period. This one, the William books are set in a village, small town or a village, in a more rural setting. And it just means that you have a little bit a change in dynamics. Like, oops, sorry, wrong side. This is the road here behind me. As you've seen already, it's got potholes with puddles in, so it's not a sealed road. It will be like a clay surface which has stones in it, and then alongside it, to take the rain away from the main surface, you have these ditches here, and often ditches do have a part to play in some of William's hijinks. Anyway, so enough of all that sort of random chatter. Before I start, I have 3 tips for you if you're new here. The first tip, make sure you have something to drink. Make sure you've got water, because water keeps your brain ticking, and your body. Have something to snack on, and I'm looking around because I'm trying to find my snack. Today I have pre-sliced cheese, which is largely not going weirdo background. It's got reflections this time. I've had some fun with my green screening, because sometimes the cheese will disappear into the background, and even though this is yellow, my computer thinks it's green. I have no idea. That side of technology, some of those things is probably something to do with the intensity of the colour. So point 1 was make sure you have something to drink handy. So I've got water to keep my brain going and my throat supple for my voice. I've also got some coffee. That's my other favourite drink. Have something to snack on. I've got cheese, and have somewhere, yes, I should actually have it closer, somewhere comfortable to sit. And I'm just getting this as an example for you. I've got a nice soft cushion here that I really like having handy. Sometimes I use it, sometimes I sit on it, sometimes I don't. Obviously I'm not sitting on it at the moment, I'd wobble around too much. Somewhere comfortable to sit, so that's the third tip. And you're most welcome to be studying, working, doing housework, something else, and just have me chattering away in the background. I'm all good with that. It's a little bit like the way people use audiobooks, except this is nothing like an audiobook, because I chat with you and I make mistakes and I have a terrible accent when it comes to putting on an accent for a story, so most of the time I try not to. And I often get lost partway through a page, not just a page, not just a paragraph, partway through a sentence while I'm actually reading it. That's a special skill. I bet you can't do that. Anyway, enough of that. All of those bits and pieces. Let's get reading. I am reading William Again by Richmal Crompton. It was published in 1923, and I'm reading it from my little iPad mini first generation, which is so old that you can't actually do any updates on it. You can't put any apps on it. The only thing that it really is any good for is it does actually tell the time reasonably accurately. I can go online and download my books for reading to you from Project Gutenberg, which is a website that hosts public domain books. I'm just going to prop my iPad up here. It's a second-hand one. It was a hand-me-down. Actually, it was a gift, hand-me-down gift. What was a gift? It was gifted to me, and it was a hand-me-down at the same time. Rattle, rattle, rattle. Trying to find something to prop up one corner of it because it always slumps sideways. There, that's better. And then I don't have it in my hands going like this and then lean on the desk and have everything for you going because I'm leaning on my desk. Anyway, so there you go. Let's get on with reading. Hey? Here we go. William Again by Richmal Crompton. Chapter 7. William's Secret Society. Ooh, where is today's story going to go? Now, we've got enough time. I should be able to actually... Oh, no, this is a longer chapter. Maybe not. We may actually only do one chapter today. We'll see how we do. Yeah, I'm not sure. If you see me looking over here at this angle, it's because I'm looking at my other monitor, just making sure that things are working the way they are supposed to, because they don't always. There are sometimes things that happen on the computer, my computer, that don't work quite the way I expect them to. Have you had that happen? Has it been a surprise to you? There's just a whole lot of things like that that happen in life, I think. There's not a lot I can do about it. I'm just trying to do something here while I'm talking to you before I get on with the next bit. Right, here we go. Just get that one away so it's not distracting me. Do I have something ready so I can look things up for you? Yes, I do. That one's ready. I have my document standing by where I have to paste things in if there's anything goes wrong. My microphone is going, and thankfully I didn't have to have you telling me that it wasn't. I can see the little bar going up and down, which is why I drop my eyes away from the camera from time to time, as I'm just checking that things are working. I've got everything going otherwise. The lights are on, the camera's on, the microphone's on. The things alongside me are alongside me. I have my drink, I have my food, I have my coffee. Let's read. William Again by Richmal Crompton, Chapter 7, William's Secret Society. William considered that the microbe world was treating him unfairly. Mild chickenpox would be, on the whole, a welcome break in the monotony of life. It would mean delicacies such as jelly and cream and chicken. Chicken used to be a luxury food for a lot of us, because if you weren't actually raising your own chickens and living on a farm, you had to buy them, and they were an expensive type of meat. I remember these things. I'm not quite as old as the era when this was written, but there were a lot of things that were still quite common that I had in common with the way life was lived back then. Although we did have a lot more common electricity and refrigerators and things like that. Anyway, so it would mean delicacies such as jelly and cream and chicken. It would mean respite from the pressing claims of education, having to go to school. It would afford an excuse for disinclination to work for months afterwards. Yes, if you've had chicken pox and you've been rather ill with it, it can take you a long time to come right. If you're an adult and had chicken pox when you were a child, there is a possibility of getting other things again later on. Not chickenpox, but the things that do actually linger that affect how you can cope with the world. Anyway, so here you go. Williams recognised that it would afford an excuse for disinclination to work for months afterwards. William was an expert in the tired look and deep sigh that, for many months after an illness, would touch his mother's heart and make her tell him to put his books away and go out for a walk. No one could rival William in extracting the last ounce of profit from a slight indisposition. And now Henry, Douglas, and Ginger, William's bosom friends and companions in crime, had all succumbed to chickenpox. And chickenpox had passed William by, leaving him aggrieved and lonely. William himself spared no effort. He breathed in heavily the atmosphere of Ginger's Latin grammar, on which Ginger had been lately engaged, as soon as he heard that Ginger had fallen a victim. It was no use. William caught nothing. So William was left alone, bereft of his faithful friends, gloomily picturing their existence as one glorified holiday. But his troubles did not end there. Mr. Cremer, William's peaceful and long-suffering form master, that's class teacher, became ill, and the next morning his place was taken by Mr. French. William's attitude to his schoolmasters was, as a rule, one of pitying forbearance, but he was, on the whole, quite kindly disposed to them. He indulged their whims, he smiled at their jokes, he endured their sarcasm, but he refused to concentrate his mental powers on X's and Y's and dates like 1815 in the few precious hours that were at his disposal in the evenings. Instead of doing homework, he preferred to play at Red Indians, or pirates, or to hunt for rats and rabbits with Jumble, his mongrel dog. Until the coming of Mr. French, William's relations with his schoolmasters had been fairly amicable. There you go, that's a good word for you. I bet you know what it means. They got on reasonably well. Not fabulous, but it was a peaceful sort of an existence. Up until Mr. French. Until the coming of Mr. French, William's relations with his schoolmasters had been fairly amicable. Mr. Cremer was a pacifist. He wanted peace at any price. He frankly avoided conflict with William. If he saw William quietly engaged in drawing beetles during his lesson, he did not expostulate. He thanked heaven for it. He was not a proud man. But Mr. French definitely disliked William. He kept him in till unreasonable hours in the evening. Upon William's making a quiet and unostentatious exit by way of the window, when his back was turned, he followed William to his home, appeared suddenly when William was sitting down to a delayed but welcome meal, and led him ignominiously back. When William and his special friends, according to their time-honoured custom, had bought a large pork pie to be passed surreptitiously round for a bite each, in order to beguile the tedium of a geometry lesson, Mr. French descended upon William as he was in the act of making the first bite, and condemned him to consume the mountainous whole before the assembled form. It was not that the pork pie was really too much for William's digestive capacity. It was that even William felt the procedure to be lacking in dignity. Moreover, there was a stormy meeting afterwards of shareholders in the pie, who demanded their money back. I can understand that. Do you know what a pork pie is? I shall find you a picture. Just because they are rather delicious. And they're a pie which you can quite easily eat cold without it causing any issues. Let's see if I can find a good picture for you that will help you to visualize it. And if you are vegetarian, I'm very sorry, I can't help you with this situation. You just have to put up with it. Or put your fingers in your ears. Or find something else to think about. Whatever, I'm not sure, sorry. Now Now, pork pies are something that we can get in New Zealand. They're not common pies for us. We tend to have what we call meat pies, which are, pork pie is a type of meat pie, but the meat pies that we have a tendency to be ones that have a sauce in them, and they're ones that you eat when they are hot, and they are individual sized pies, so they are savoury meat pies. So when I read of Americans having pie and thinking pie is wonderful, they're usually talking about dessert pies, and it's usually a slice that is cut from what we would call a family-sized pie, which is about this big, about the size of a not oversized dinner plate. Right, so here we're getting the picture of the pork pie. Here we go. Open and move it over to where you can see it. Picture of pork pie. So that's pork mince, ground up the right way. It's kind of like a sausage meat made out of pork, with like a gelatinous sauce that's poured around it, and they're always this sort of rather rectangular shape when you look at them side on, with very upright sides, whereas our pies are like this because the pie dishes are stacked when they're not in use. This is if you're buying a pie from a pie shop or a bakery or a corner store or a dairy. We call them dairies, corner stores, because they sell milk. And we used to have a trading law that said that all shops had to be shut on Saturdays and Sundays and public holidays, except for places that sold milk, because in the old days people didn't have refrigerators, and if you didn't have a refrigerator but you relied on milk for your tea and your coffee and your cereal for breakfast, and it was also very strongly promoted as something that would help your body because of the extra calcium in it, then you had to be able to get your milk fairly fresh, because in summertime it would go rotten very, very quickly if it was not refrigerated. And not everybody had an ice box nor had ice delivery, because that was something you had to pay for. So you needed to have a store that you could walk to, because not everybody had a car back then, or even before the days of cars, where you could walk to buy your bottle of milk, to be able to have it available for until the next day when you bought your milk. And so those sort of shops were called a dairy, because they sold dairy products, and they were allowed to stay open because they sold essentials like milk, bread, and newspapers. And on public holidays they were allowed to be open. On Sundays, when everything else was shut, they were allowed to be open. And so that's one of the reasons why we used to have a lot of them. Everywhere had a dairy, and that's what we called them. The English call them a corner store or a convenience store, that sort of thing. But usually rather small and rather crowded with different products. Not always the best quality of other products, because they didn't sell a lot of other things, just because it usually cost a lot more than going to the supermarket. But that's what we have. And they are also places where you could buy a meat pie. They have a pie warmer there, because somebody makes pies and ships them to these places, and then they put a few pies in their pie warmer, get them nice and warm, and at lunchtime people who want a special treat will go in and they'll buy themselves an individual serving meat pie. It's about this deep, and it's about this oval sort of shape. It's about half the size of my face, well, less than that actually, with diced up meat and some vegetables and a nice thick brown sauce gravy sort of thing. And our New Zealand ones are usually very nice because they've got a lovely flaky pastry that is delicious. You just have to be careful not to eat them when they're too hot. You need to let them cool a little bit in their little brown paper bag, because the gravy can burn you if it's too hot. Anyway, as a difference to what they had, which was a pork pie, which you could eat cold. You bought it cold and ate it cold. Brilliant sort of a pie for taking on picnics. And the inside, as I say, is textured more like cooked sausage meat, where it's cooked as one big mass, and it sticks itself together very nicely. Very, very yummy. Very yummy, even if you're not normally into pork as a type of meat. I don't really like pork, but pork pies, very yummy. Mind you, pies are quite nice. It's the pastry, I think. Anyway, so that is what they had. They had pulled their money together, their pocket money. They had bought a pork pie and they were going to share it in the class by surreptitiously passing it on to each other and having a bite, because this is the sort of pie that you could do that with, unlike the sort of pie that I'm used to. And Mr. French had made William eat the whole pie, and the others missed out because he had to eat it. Not that he couldn't eat it, but it was because it was very messy and it wasn't very nice for the others to have missed out, and they then want their piece of pie. But they can't have it because William's eaten it, even though he didn't really want to have to eat it. But we will carry on reading. It was not that the pork pie was really too much for William's digestive capacity. It was that even William felt the procedure to be lacking in dignity. Moreover, there was a stormy meeting afterwards of shareholders in the pie, who demanded their money back. But it was when William had spent the whole of afternoon school laboriously writing the first chapter of what was to be an epoch-making story, and Mr. French had seized upon it, read it aloud to the form, and then burnt it publicly and disdainfully, that William felt it was time that something happened to Mr. French. Oh dear, I don't know that Mr. French has actually listened to the other teachers to find out what William can be like. He was proud of that story, that's William. He thought it sounded a jolly good yarn, even when read by Mr. French, who didn't seem to know how to pronounce half the words. I'm guessing William's spelling wasn't great. The policeman rushed upon the outlaw as he stood there so proudly and manly, was how he had read it. And it looks worse on the page than the way I'm reading it, because my brain automatically interprets it for you, sorry. Ho, ho, he cried, come on, varlets, and I'll jolly well show you. With one sweep of his gory blade, instead of gory, 3 policemen's heads rolled off into a heap. He shot another through the brain, B-R-A-N-E, another fell strangled, and another, what had a weak heart, H-A-R-T, fell down dead at the horrible sight, S-I-T-E. Only one was left. The outlaw, L-O-R, gave a snarling laugh through his clenched teeth. Clenched written with S-H instead of C-H. Come on, varlets, he said, waving his gory blade in one hand and his gun in the other, and holding a dagger in his clenched teeth. But the policeman slank off. Coward, taunted the outlaw through clenched teeth. Obviously, William likes that phrase. William felt strongly that it was a very good story. He'd have to write the whole thing out again now. It was certainly time something happened to Mr. French. He went home, planning vengeance. He walked home slowly, his brow drawn into a stern frown, not leaping in and out of the ditch, or hurling missiles at passing friends or enemies, as was his usual custom. His thoughts were so entirely taken up with schemes of vengeance that he walked past the turning that led to his home and found himself in a road through which he did not often pass. Interesting. I wonder what's going to happen. Coffee. Have you got your drink ready? You can listen on your phone, if you aren't already. You can listen on your phone using the same address and take me with you on your phone and listen while you're actually making your drink. I do that when I'm listening to other streamers, watching other streamers. I take my phone with me and carry on being part of what's going on. It's quite wonderful being able to. I love the fact that we can use technology these days in so many useful ways, like ordering groceries online to be delivered to your house, like me being able to read to you, and you might be on the other side of the world and you might not even be listening while I'm actually reading. You might be listening to a recording of it without even having to, apart from your internet connection and the use of your device, without actually having to pay to be able to do so. Isn't that wonderful? Anyway, so William has walked on past his own street because he's thinking so hard about how he's going to extract vengeance upon Mr. French, this temporary teacher. Two boys stood outside the gate of a house. They were boys whom William's mother would have designated as common. William, whose tastes were lamentably low, looked at them with interest. He felt suddenly lonely and eager for the society of his kind. The opportunity of an introduction soon occurred. The larger of the two boys looked up to find William's scowling gaze fixed upon him. "Hello, Freckles," he called, accompanying the insult with a grimace of obviously hostile intent. William, forgetting all thoughts of Mr. French in the exhilaration of the moment, advanced threateningly. "You just say that again," he said. The red-haired boy obligingly said it again, and William closed with him. They rolled across the road and into the ditch and out of it again. William pulled the red-haired boy's nose, and the red-haired boy rubbed William's head in the dust. It was quite a friendly fight, merely an excuse for the display of physical energy. The second boy sat on the fence and watched. Every now and then he spat in the dust with a certain conscious pride. I'm guessing he's learned how to spit fairly recently. At last, friendly relations having been established by the bout, William and the red-haired boy sat up in the dust and looked at each other. "What's your name?" demanded William. "Sam. What's yourn?" "William. D'you go to school?" The red-haired boy looked scornful. "School? Me? Not much. I'm working." "I am." "I works there, I does." He cocked his thumb in the direction of the house. "He ain't much catch, though, he ain't. Stingy old blighter. Never so much as says take an apple or two, or take a bunch of grapes or two. Not he. And me, the gardener's boy." He relapsed into pensive gloom at this recital of his woes. Just a wee tip here. This is another one of those things that indicates to us how much the world has changed. Now, William's about 11. This boy may be a little older. There was a time when in England, as in New Zealand and Australia and probably Canada and the rest of North America, places like that, where it was you were supposed to go to school, but if your family needed your income, it was more of a priority to actually go and work. Or if you had no family, it wasn't as regulated to make sure that children were at school. And it was quite common earlier than this period for there wasn't actually a law that required you to go to school. There may have been free education available, but if you could provide income, then you did that. You didn't go and waste your time in an educational institution that was not going to help you anyway, because most people were not doing jobs that required you to be able to read and write. You actually were doing stuff with your hands and your brain, your physical body, and that didn't actually have the same requirement for words to be written and read. So I'm guessing that this young lad here is probably a similar age to William, about 11 or 12, but he's not having to work, not having to study at school. It was just kind of the done thing that you did, but if you could get away with it and go and work in a job, then you did that. He may be older. Let's carry on and find out. He relapsed into pensive gloom at this recital of his woes. "So, don't you ever get none?" said William sympathetically. "Don't I?" said Sam with a wink. "What d'ye think? That's all I asks ya. What d'ye think? But it'd be friendlier in him to ask me to have one or two." "Not," he admitted, "as it makes much difference, but he's a stingy bloke, all as has been. He's one of these here school teachers, kind of disagreeable in his manner." Ooh. So Sam is still helping himself, but he thinks it would be nicer if the owner of the place that he works for, where he works for the undergardener or the gardener, would be nicer if the guy actually offered that he was allowed to have some. Anyway, "What's his name?" said William with sudden interest. "Old Frenchy we calls him," says Sam, "and don't he think he's clever? Not half. Oh my!" Into William's inscrutable countenance had come a gleam of light. For a moment his thoughts worked silently and daringly. "Would you like," he said at last, "to belong to a secret society?" Sam put his cap on one side and chewed a blade of grass ruminatively. "I dunno," he said. "Never tried. Leastways, not as I can call to mind." "Well," said William persuasively, "you can try now. I want to start one, and you can belong. I want you to belong 'cause you're his gardener's boy and can do things, 'cause he's awful mean and made me eat an old pie and burnt my tail and said lots of things, and I want to make a secret society for paying him out." Burnt my tail. Gave him a whack, 'cause it was done in those days. Sam seemed to grasp the situation. "All right," he said, "and what do I get for it?" This slightly nonplussed William. "Oh," he said vaguely, "it's a society. You just belong. You just belong." Sam was considering the idea. "Let's have him," he said, pointing at the boy, who was still sitting on the fence and spitting proudly at intervals. "He's errand boy at the grocer's, he is, and he's often round here. He's called Albert, he is. Halbert," he said. "Halbert, he is." Albert was approached and expressed himself willing to join. "I don't mind belonging," he said with a sigh of deep feeling. I wouldn't mind murdering of him sometimes when he tells me to get out of his gardening, scornful like. I would have murdered him long ago if it hadn't been for my poor old mother." Even William was startled. "You needn't murder him," he said hastily. "He's only got to be paid out." The secret society of vengeance met for the first time the next afternoon in an old barn on the hillside. Albert had brought a friend of the name of Leopold to swell their numbers. Leopold wore a tweed cap, many sizes too large for him, pulled down over his eyes. It gave him a daredevil air. He announced in a husky voice that he didn't care nothing for no one, so there. William looked round at his small band with a proud heart. Remember, he's gathering these people together because his mates, his chums, have largely been unavailable because they've been sick. And so he's having to make do. He can't do things completely on his own all the time. He has to have some people with him. So he's found a way to do it. William looked round at his small band with a proud heart. Though he had not forgotten the aims of his secret society, it was the fact of its existence that really thrilled him. "Now, we've got to take a sacred and solemn oath," he said, "and sign it in our blood, and get a secret password and a secret sign and a secret language." Leopold created a diversion by announcing briefly and gruffly that no one was going to sign nothing in his blood. When threatened with ejection by William and taunted with cowardice by Sam, he flung himself upon them in dramatic fury. They moved hastily aside in opposite directions, and his outstretched fist came heavily in contact with a nail in the barn door. As an adequate supply of blood seemed to be promptly assured, he lost his anger and became unbearably conceited, parading his bleeding fist and commenting on some people he knew who would have made a fuss, and no mistake, over a little thing like that. Sounds a little bit like William, actually. He didn't mind a little thing like that. Anyway, hurry up with that oath or it would be drying up. William had found in his pocket a grimy piece of paper and the stump of a pencil, and was writing with a set, purposeful expression. "Now listen," he said at last, "this is what I've wrote. We what our names are sinned in blood under this writing." I'm reading it the way he's spelled it, not the way he's saying it. "Take an oath to revenge to the death any member of this society what is treated unfair. This is a secret society. The punishment for anyone what does not revenge anyone else or what tells about this society is not to be spoke to or played with by any of the other people in the society forever till death." The signatures were the next difficulty. Leopold signed his with a scornful pride that was beginning to make him unpopular. William, feeling that his reputation as founder of the society was at stake, took out a battered penknife, made a slight incision with a dramatic gesture, and signed his name beneath Leopold's. Albert said he wasn't going to cut his finger because he was afraid of bleeding to death, and then he wouldn't be able to support his poor old mother when he was a man. He got some red paint at home, and he was going to fetch that. He wouldn't take a minute. He repeated that he wouldn't mind cutting off his head if it wasn't for his poor old mother. Leopold's airs were becoming insufferable. He ejaculated, "Oh, yes!" at intervals during Albert's speech, but the rest of the society seemed to be agreed to ignore him for the present. Sam, with an exaggerated expression of agony, manfully endured, had been coaxing a 2-days-old scratch and had just completed his signature when Albert returned with the red paint. When the document was complete, William folded it up and put it in his pocket. "Now," he said, assuming a businesslike attitude, "we've got to think of a secret password." Leopold darkly suggested Hell. But it was felt that, though sinister, it was too indefinite. Albert, after deep thought, brought forward the proposal, "Hengland Hexpects." This was felt to be, on the whole, too lofty, and finally England expects, Hengland Hexpects. And finally, Sam's suggestion of "Down with tyrants" was accepted. William proposed and seconded by himself was elected president, and the others, also on his proposal and seconding, were elected secretaries. A whistle of penetrating and inharmonious tone was originated by William as a secret sign of danger at which the whole society was to rally. Further, a member of the society, on meeting another member, was to cross his thumb and first finger and to utter darkly the words, "Outlaw, brother." There you go. Crossing finger and thumb. Sorry, I'm trying to get it so you can see it. Crossing finger and thumb, I guess. Finally, each member raised his right hand, uttered slowly and solemnly the fatal words, "Down with tyrants, till death," and the meeting dispersed. And there's a slight pause in the book, and we shall carry on after I've had a mouthful of coffee. Mr. French became thoughtful. The morning after he kept William in, he found, with painful consequences, a hornet in his boot. Not the boot of his car, his footwear boots. His boot. The evening after he had showered on William his choicest sarcasms, he found the back tire of his bicycle punctured. After another conflict with William, he found various indispensable things missing from his bag when he arrived at school, though he could have sworn he had put them in. He found them later in the greenhouse. On another occasion he found that a little soot had been put in his hat and had reposed on his head as he had paid a call, and, all unconscious of his appearance, had tried to charm his headmaster's daughter. In those days, gentlemen wore hats when they were out, and they would take their hat off when they spoke to a woman or when they were greeting someone. So the soot, maybe on the inside sweatband of the hat, would have been on his head, and rather embarrassing for someone who was normally very proper. It was incredible, but he pondered deeply over the matter and always came to the same conclusion. It was incredible, but he tried ignoring William, and the curious, inexplicable annoyances ceased. It was certainly incredible, but he left it at that. The aims of the society widened. When Mr. Beale, the squire of the village, chased William in person out of his orchard with the help of dogs, sticks, and stones, he found the next morning in his orchard, in full view of the road, a scarecrow bearing a curious resemblance to himself, and wearing a suit of his old clothes. When the Reverend Cuthbert Pugh called William a nasty, dirty little boy, and I am sure a great trial to his dear mother, he discovered the next morning horrid little gargoyle-like faces outlined in white paint on all his trees, most unpleasant and conspicuous and unclerical. It was altogether a successful secret society. It achieved its aims. It gave William back his self-respect, which Mr. French had considerably impaired. The secretaries, Sam, Albert and Leopold, seemed to take delight in avenging the insults heaped by an unsympathetic world on their president. It was pure joy to William to meet any of them in the streets or lanes, cross his finger and thumb, and utter darkly the words, "Outlaw brother." So far, all was well. Then Ginger, Henry and Douglas recovered from chicken-pox and came back to school. The peaceful and inoffensive Mr. Kremer returned to his own form room, and Mr. French retired to his own fifth form. Mr. French was not sorry to go. He went with one last speculative look at William, and with the final thought that it was incredible, but life held once more games and walks and daring adventures with Ginger, Henry and Douglas. William lost his sense of grievance. He realised from his friends' accounts of their illness that he had not missed much. Gradually the once thrilling thought of his secret society ceased to thrill him. At first he took delight in uttering the mysterious password when he was with Ginger, Henry or Douglas, but he became bored with it himself, even before it got on their nerves, and they took active physical measures to get it off their nerves. "All right," agreed William, picking himself out of the ditch and removing the dead leaves from his hair and mouth. "I won't say it again, but I jolly well won't tell you why I used to say it. It's a deadly secret, and I guess you can't guess what it means." "Yes, and I guess we jolly well don't want to," returned Ginger. It was the next week that William called a final meeting of the secret society to announce its dissolution. As the members appeared, he realised how intensely he disliked them. Leopold especially. He hated Leopold now. He hated his large cap and little eyes and projecting teeth. He looked at him coldly and critically as he made his speech. "The society's got to stop now, because I've got a lot of other things to do, and we're making a bridge over the stream in the field, and I've not got time for secret societies. And I don't want revenging any more, because he's gone now, and so we'll stop it." "What about till death?" said Leopold hoarsely. "Things has changed since then," said William. "Oh, yes," said Leopold scathingly. William's dislike of Leopold increased. "Anyway, I made it," he said aggressively, "so I can stop it." "All right," said Sam, "you can pay us off and stop it." "Pay you off?" said William, aghast. "Yes," agreed Albert. "You pay us off and we'll stop it." "Oh, yes," said Leopold. "I'm not going to pay. I've not got anything to pay you off with," said William desperately. "You don't be paid for being in a secret society. I told you didn't. You just belong." "Well," said Sam, as if astounded by the depravity of human nature, "and us working for you, risking our lives for you," put in Leopold pathetically. "To be treated like this here," ended Albert sadly. But what do you want?" said the president wildly. I've not got any money left this week, and next week and the weeks after's going to pay for an old clock being mended what I was just looking at, and I put it back all right, except as how was I to know there was too many wheels in it? And I tell you, you don't be paid for just being in a secret society. No one is. They just belong. I keep telling you. You don't understand. What about till death? Put in Leopold again in his sepulchral tones. "All right," said Sam. "We'll just go and tell old Frenchy and Mr. Beale and Mr. Pugh and your father that we did all those things, but you put us up to them and made us do them." He gazed at William dispassionately. "I'm sorry for you. You'll catch it." William's freckled countenance was full of horror and amazement. He passed a grimy hand through his already wild hair. Actually, I'm just noticing this particular chapter so far hasn't had any pictures. Why is that? Oh well, maybe we'll get some soon. Did I actually get this set up? No, I didn't get it set up for any more pictures, did I? I'm not going to show you one yet. I'll show it to you when we get to that part of the story. Right, carrying on. He passed a grimy hand through his already wild hair. But it's not right. You don't understand. It's a society. You did the things because you belonged. You can't go and tell of them afterwards. You don't understand. We won't tell of them if you'll pay us off, said Sam. What about till death? Said Leopold triumphantly, with an air of bringing forward an irrefutable argument. William took refuge in sarcasm. I believe I've told you, he said with a passable imitation of Mr. French's manner, that I have no money. I shall be very glad to make some money for you out of nothing if you'll show me how. Oh yes, if you can show someone if you can show someone what's not got any money how to make some money out of nothing, I'll make some for you as much as you like. Oh yes. I hope, he ended, remembering one of Mr. French's favourite phrases, that I make myself quite clear. They gazed at him in unwilling admiration of his eloquence. Sam brought them back to the matter in hand. It needn't be money, he said. All we say is we ought to get something for all the trouble and danger we've took for you. Something to eat would do. Something nice and big. Yes, and how am I to get it? Demanded William indignantly. Do you want me to starve? Do you think my folks would look on and watch me starving to death, giving my food to you, just 'cause you went and put an old scarecrow in someone's garden? Do you think that's a good reason for one person to starve to death 'cause another person put a scarecrow in another person's garden? They were aware that in rhetoric William soared far beyond them. Well, we'll go home with you, said Sam, ignoring the argument. Either you just give us something nice and big to eat, or we'll tell your father. Sorry, I'm just going to adjust my camera ever so slightly. Actually, I don't even need to do it that way. Camera, that one there. I can do this. There, that's a bit better. Right, carrying on. Either you just give us something nice and big to eat, or we'll tell your father. Yes, William, though rather pale, laughed scornfully. Yes, you just come home with me, he said. I guess you've not seen our dog, have you? Nearly as big as a horse. I guess there won't be much of you left when our dog sees you, huh? With what was meant to be a sinister laugh, he turned on his heel and strolled off. With sinking heart, he saw that they were accompanying him, Leopold and his projecting teeth walking by William's side, Sam and Albert behind, with a slight swagger and humming airily to himself, but with apprehension at his heart. William slowly wended his homeward way. At the gate stood Jumble, his dog, small and friendly, and rapturously glad to see them all. Jumble was no snob. Having assured William of his lifelong devotion and ecstatic joy at seeing him again, he went on to expend a tempestuous welcome to Sam, Albert, and Leopold. William looked at him with affectionate sorrow. Though he adored Jumble, he thought he'd ask for a bloodhound for his next birthday. A really savage one that would recognise his enemies at a glance. He walked, still with his careless swagger, but with his heart sinking lower at every step, round to the side door. Sam, Albert and Leopold still accompanied him. Now, whispered Sam, you go and get us something real slap-up to eat, or we'll tell your father what you made us do. William entered the side door and shut it firmly. He went first to the kitchen. Cook was lifting a large pie out of the oven. His gloomy expression lifted. "What's that for, cook?" he inquired politely. "For some people as is coming to supper tonight, and none of your business, Master William." There was no love lost between William and cook. William wandered casually over to the larder door and opened it gently. Cook wheeled around sharply. "Please come away from that door and go out of my kitchen, Master William. Your tea's laid in the dining room." William uttered his famous scornful laugh. "Ha! If I wanted anything to eat, I wouldn't come here for it. I wouldn't care to eat anything out of this larder. My goodness, I'd sooner starve than eat stuff out of this larder, if I make myself quite clear." Cheered by these crushing remarks, but still apprehensive of what the next few hours might bring him, he went into the dining room. His spirits rose still further at the sight of a lavish meal, but dropped as he noticed the presence of his mother and grown-up sister, Ethel. He would have preferred a clear field for his operations. He uttered the mumbling sound with which he generally greeted his family. "You're rather late, dear," said his mother. "Are your hands clean?" William replied by the same non-committal grunt, pushed back his untidy hair with his hands, then hastily sat down, keeping his hands beneath the tablecloth till public interest in their colour should have waned. Through the window he could plainly see the forms of Sam, Albert, and Leopold standing outside, and his apprehension increased. I'm thinking that's where this picture is meant to come in. There they are, outside the window. Sam, Leopold, and Albert. Sorry, I'd already turned a page. We'll find out if that's actually the one that we're meant to have, but it doesn't matter for now. "Mother," he said faintly, "it feels kind of stuffy in here. May I take my tea out into the garden? I think I could eat it better there." Mrs. Brown looked at him anxiously. Just remember, they've had chicken pox going around the village. "Do you feel ill, darling?" "Kind of," said William. "I feel kind of as if I'd like to have tea out of doors. I could eat quite a big tea, but only out of doors. It's that kind of a feeling. Sort of as if I felt faint and not hungry indoors, but would be all right, and wanting a big tea in the garden." "Fiddlesticks," said Ethel coldly. "If you feel like that, darling," said Mrs. Brown, "I think you'd better lie down. I'll bring you up a nice little tea on a tray." William perceived that Sam was grimacing at him through the window and pointed meaningly at the table. "It's not that sort of feeling at all," said William. "It's quite a different sort. I'd like just cake, lots of cake, in the garden. I'd feel all right then if I could just take a lot of cake to eat outside." And that's where the book now shows me the picture of the others outside. Through the window, William could plainly see the menacing faces of Sam, Albert, and Leopold, so I did get that right. "William," said Mrs. Brown, who had moved over to the window, "who are those boys in the garden?" Just a moment. I am meant to give you another picture right now, and I shall try and find it for you. Here we go. "William, who are those boys in the garden?" William moistened his lips. "Which boys?" he said innocently, but with an expression of grim despair. "There, by the hedge. They're pulling faces at you." "Oh, those," said William, as if seeing them for the first time. "Do you mean those?" "Who are they, William?" said his mother. "Those boys," said William slowly, to gain time, "just friends of mine. That's all, just friends of mine that was interested in gardens and wanted to see." "But they're horrid, common, rough boys," said William's mother. William gave a hollow laugh. "Oh no, they're not really. They only look like horrid, common, rough boys. They're dressed like common, horrid, rough boys. They—" "Don't talk nonsense, William. Go and tell them to go away at once. Have you finished your tea?" William glared bitterly at the people who seemed bent on bringing about his doom. "Oh, yes," he said, "I've had all the tea I feel like having in here. I don't know what'll happen to me later on," he went on pathetically, "with not having been able to have my tea the way I felt like. Go and send those boys away at once, William, and never bring them here again." William, whose opinion of life in general was, at this moment, unprintable, went slowly to the garden. "You've got to go away," he said in a hoarse whisper. "She says so." "All right, we'll go and tell your father." "No," said William, "you wait by the gate and I'll bring you something as soon, and my goodness, it'll be a long time before I go in for any more secret societies." They went furtively down the garden drive and William returned to the house. The guests were arriving. He caught sight of the Reverend Cuthbert Pugh and Mr. Beale as they were being ushered into the drawing-room. He hovered disconsolately round the kitchen. Cook was securely in possession. She watched his every movement suspiciously. The position was desperate. Something must be done. He's hoping to sneak some food out of the kitchen, you can tell. At any moment the story of his crimes might be laid before his father. As Cook opened and shut the larder door, he caught sight of a large pie with brown, crisp-looking pastry upon the top shelf. That surely would pay off the blackmailing ex-secretaries of the Secret Society of Vengeance. Quickly William formed his plans. To go to the larder by the kitchen door was impossible, but somehow or other he must get that pie. He went out of the front door and crept round the house to the larder window. It was unlatched. He opened it quietly and climbed in, holding his breath in suspense, his fierce and scowling gaze fixed upon the door that led to the kitchen. He took the pie and silently climbed out again. There was exultation in his heart. I'm just going to check to see if there are other pictures I'm meant to be doing. Nope, that's right. There was exultation in his heart. The end was in sight. But he reckoned without Caesar. Caesar was a boarhound belonging to Mr. Beale, who accompanied his master on all his social calls and waited outside the front door for him. On this occasion he seemed to be labouring under the delusion that William was kindly bringing some refreshment for him to beguile his long evening. He advanced to meet William with tail wagging and nose eagerly sniffing the delicious perfume of veal and ham pie. His whole bearing expressed anticipation and gratitude. William said "Down" in a fierce whisper and held his precious pie high above his head. Caesar pranced along by his side, his eyes uplifted toward the heavenly smell. William had planned to creep through a shrubbery to the side gate, but it is difficult to creep through a shrubbery, holding a heavy pie above one's head, in close company with an enormous dog whose energies are wholly concentrated on obtaining possession of the pie. William managed the situation for some time. He said "Down" often and fiercely, and struggled on bravely, dragging the pie aloft through laurel and holly bushes. But Caesar felt at last that he had been trifled with long enough. He rose on 2 legs, placed his paws on William's shoulders, impelled him gently to the ground, and plunged his nose into his delicious supper. William sat up, rubbed a bruised elbow, and looked round. Caesar's appetite and capacity were unlimited. Half the pie had disappeared already, and the rest was fast disappearing. "Crumbs," said William, remembering the title of a book he had read lately. Talk about dogged by fate. With that thought came the thought of the hero of the book, Dick the Dauntless. He'd have thought nothing of a thing like that. He'd have thought nothing of taking on Sam and Albert and Leopold all together and beating them up. He'd have just walked up to them and let them see that they'd jolly well better leave him alone in future. He'd have just laughed at that dog eating up all the pie. William promptly uttered a harsh sound, and Caesar cocked an ear and looked up apologetically. William was not a romanticist for nothing. He had ceased to be William. Dick the Dauntless swaggered down the path to the gate with a dark scowl on his face. Sam peered through the dusk. "Well," he said eagerly, "what have you got?" Through the bushes, Caesar swallowed the last mouthful of veal and ham pie and sat back with an expression of seraphic happiness. And Jumble humbly came forward to lick the dish. "Nothing, you old varlets," cried Dick the Dauntless, "and I jolly well won't get anything ever, till death. So there, and you just clear off from outside my house, or I'll—" He flung himself upon Sam. Sam, who was taken by surprise, rolled into the ditch. Albert and Leopold rushed upon William. Sam crawled out of the ditch to join them, and the battle began. And there's a slight pause in our timeline here. "It's gone," said Mrs. Brown. "Simply gone." The three men looked at her in bewilderment. "The veal and ham pie," said Mrs. Brown. "The one we were going to have for supper. Cook says she put it in the larder only 2 minutes ago, and now it's gone. Simply gone. No one's been through the kitchen. Cook's been near the larder door all the time. Some tramp must have seen it through the window and taken it, and—" "He can't have gone far," said Mr. Brown. Mr. Beale sprang up. "Let's catch him. He's probably eating it in the shrubbery now." The three men went out and gazed upon the darkening garden. A faint crackling of twigs in the shrubbery reached them. In single file and on tiptoe they set out. At last they discerned a dim figure in front of them, carrying something in its arms and accompanied by a dog. "There he is!" "Quietly, we'll get him. He's made friends with Caesar." Quite a small man, almost a boy. There was a horrible suspicion at the heart of William's father, but he followed with the rest. The figure disappeared behind a laurel bush. They followed, still on tiptoe. Behind the bush they found only Caesar finishing the remains of the pie, and Jumble watching him with wistful envy. "Catch the old villain before he makes off," said Mr. Beale, and they hastened on to the hedge at the end of the garden and looked over it. There was a glorious sight met their eyes. Dick the Dauntless was fighting for his life against hundreds of foes. He punched and butted and dodged and closed. Thousands fell at each stroke. He was dimly aware of three heads watching him over the hedge, but he had no time to look at them. He heard vague sounds such as, "Go it, William! Get one in now, old chap! Jolly good, jolly good! Give him strong!" Albert, with a bewildered cry of "Oh, help!" and a bleeding nose, began to run off towards home. There was very little left of Dick the Dauntless, but with a desperate effort he flung Leopold into the ditch, whence Leopold crawled forth and followed Albert. Only Sam was left. Sam was large and no coward, and in spite of a bruised eye would have kept up the fight longer had not Caesar appeared. One glance at Caesar was enough for Sam. Echoing Albert's cry of "Oh, help!" he fled for dear life down the road. Then Dick the Dauntless vanished, and William, his collar burst, his tie streaming, his coat torn, his ear bleeding, turned to survey his audience of three from a quickly closing eye. Swelling up. Pause. William, in his pyjamas, pondered for a moment over the mystery of human life as he bestowed those few perfunctory brushes upon his shock of hair that constituted its evening toilet. Getting yourself ready for bed was referred to as your toilet. The preparations, getting clean and tidy. He had that day committed almost every crime known to boyhood. He had brought common boys home. He had stolen a pie. He had fought openly on the high road. That's the main road. He had spoilt his collar and tie and coat and acquired a thoroughly disreputable black eye. Finally, turning from these crimes, fully expecting to meet with retribution at the hands of his family, he had been acclaimed as a hero. He was bewildered. He did not understand it. He did not know why he was a hero instead of a criminal. Anyway, it wasn't worth bothering over. And anyway, he was going to have a jolly fine black eye, he thought proudly. He turned a somersault from his chair to his bed, which was his normal manner of entering it, and drew the clothes, the blankets and sheets, up to his chin. Before he finally surrendered to the power of sleep, he summed up his chief impressions of the evening. "They're jolly queer, grown-ups are," he said, sleepily. "Jolly queer." And that's the end of that chapter and our reading, because it was twice as long as they usually are, the chapter today. The next one is the Native Protege. That's interesting. It's probably going to come off as a little bit racist, but I think the intention was more to describe things from the point of view of a young boy who had no experience of other cultures. So you'll have to be forgiving and learn from it. But we're not doing that this time. We are doing that next time. And I've got my cheese to eat now that we've finished reading. And you've got all sorts of wonderful things that you can go and do too. So I'm going to give you a couple of links. And obviously, if you're on YouTube, I'm not actually talking to you at the moment. I'm talking to the people who are watching me live on Twitch, or even watching the recording on Twitch. I'm going to give you my YouTube channel. Let's try spelling that correctly. There you go. There's the link for my YouTube channel. So if there's any of the stories that I have done previously that you would like to have a listen to because you're all caught up with everything else I've been reading, that's where you'll find it. I've put the books into playlists and you can just work your way through them as you wish. They're exactly the same as what I have here, with all the chat at the beginning and the end, and if there's chapters, there's chat in between. I get lost. They're not edited in any way, except that I've removed everything outside of my actual video window, just because the chat that's there has no relevance for people who are listening on YouTube. And if you are listening on YouTube and you want to be part of what goes on when I'm reading live, and it can be quite fun actually. I have people looking things up for me. I read out the definitions of words that they have found for me, and that sort of thing. Then what you do is you go to my profile on YouTube, which will be, you just click on my name and it will take you to that bit, and either on the header picture, if you're looking on your computer on a browser, there will be a couple of links on the corner of actually it's here for you, in the bottom right of my header picture. It'll actually be up here above or below the video, or you go to my about page on my YouTube channel and it will give you the link for my Twitch channel. And if you go to that, you can then, if you're not already a member of Twitch, you can join it. It doesn't cost you anything to join. There is a paid option, but you don't need to use it. Most people don't pay for using Twitch. They expect you not to. So Twitch and YouTube are very similar in that you actually can have a free membership and do lots of things without having to worry about getting into paid things. So you can then follow me on Twitch, and Twitch will tell you when I go live, and then you can be part of the conversation. If you are new to YouTube and you're coming there from Twitch, then you can subscribe to my channel, and YouTube will tell you when I put up a new video, which will be one of the ones that I have recorded having read live on Twitch. And also there is actually a Discord server which is very, 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 very quiet. We hardly ever talk about anything there, and occasionally I will post illustrations from one of the stories we've been reading, and we will sometimes get into discussions about places that are in the books, even get into general discussions about what sort of books we would like to read next. And so you can make some contributions there, because if you're on Twitch and you put anything in chat when I'm not there, I will not get to see it. So that's the way of being able to do it. Otherwise, leave a comment on YouTube. Don't forget, thumbs up, and leave happy comments on YouTube, because the stories are for families. And so it would be good to keep that in mind, to keep it suitable for families to be able to read. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And I hope you've had lots of fun. What else? I think that's about it. You can go off and do your thing now, I suppose. As I said, thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And in the meantime, between now and when I see you next, happy reading. Bye.